Welcome to the Quantum Yoga Podcast. We're here today with Dr. Rajan Narayanan, the Executive Director of Life and Yoga. Welcome to the program. I'm very excited to have you on and looking forward to learning about your work.
Thank you.
Can we start with just an introduction, if you can tell the listeners about your two organizations and generally about the work that you do?
Okay. Actually, there are three organizations over here. The first organization is called Life and Yoga Foundation, and then the second organization, Life and Yoga Institute, and the third organization, Council for Yoga Accreditation International. Now, the first organization, Life and Yoga Foundation, was founded in 2006, and it is a charitable nonprofit that is designed to promote yoga, the correct understanding of yoga. In 2011, Life and Yoga Institute came along, when in 2010 we started doing continuing medical education courses for doctors. At that time, we incorporated the Life and Yoga Institute as a separate entity that is focused only for education in yoga as opposed to promoting yoga. So all our activities we do through Life and Yoga Institute. Now Life and Yoga Foundation is only, it provides funding for any activity that helps to promote yoga. So people who make these donations, they give donations to Life and Yoga Foundation as a charitable tax-deductible donation, whereas the Life and Yoga Institute is the one that conducts pretty much most of the activities of Life and Yoga. The third organization, Life and Yoga, the Council for Yoga Accreditation International, is not really part of Life and Yoga, but rather it is a separate entity that is a joint entity of many yoga institutions, many of the traditional yoga institutions from India and a few others from other parts of the world together. And this goes back to 2012, where these institutions came together to put together standards. Now, what happened is most of the yoga institutions associated with these are some traditional ones from India. And in 2015, the Council for Yoga Accreditation had set standard exams for 3 levels of certification in yoga. And just at that time, the Indian government announced with the first International Day of Yoga on June 21st, that they were coming with a set of standards. Quality Council of India had announced standards for different levels of yoga. And when they announced the standard, because of the Indian institutions involved with the council, we kind of went into a frozen mode, not knowing what we were going to do after that. And now only yesterday, there was a resolution that the standards that had come from the Indian government were not good enough. And so we were going to move forward with the standards that we had set. So the worldwide, standard exam is going to go into motion shortly. So that is how that came about.
It's fascinating. And is this organization similar in nature to Yoga Alliance?
See, the thing is, the standards of Yoga Alliance are largely based upon something where yoga is seen as something physical, and the spiritual dimension and the higher dimensions of yoga are not there represented in Yoga Alliance. We say within the people who understand yoga, anybody who does not understand yoga is about internal communication of our biomeridians, which are called Nadis in yoga. So anybody who does not understand Nadis in yoga is not really understanding yoga at all. So so from our perspective, all these other certifications may be useful if you want to go and be an instructor in a yoga studio or in a hospital or somewhere. but they don't truly represent the inner dimensions of yoga.
And so this Council for Yoga Accreditation International is an international certifying body of 3 levels for a sort of a fuller dimensional understanding of yoga.
That is correct. Instructor level, teacher level, and therapist level, the 3 levels.
A great place to start would be a discussion and explanation of the Nadis.
So the Nadis, if we can understand them, the easiest way to explain them is biomeridians, because most people are familiar with the Chinese medicine and the concept of biomeridians, where if somebody is off balance, they will stick a pin inside you, acupuncture, right? And the healing process through acupuncture. And acupuncture will essentially tell you that this particular biomeridian is blocked. That's why by inserting the needle, they're they're releasing whatever that blockage might be. So that is the acupuncture parlance. And you, of course, found me through Korotkov. And Korotkov uses the bioweather instrument, electrophotonic imaging, and essentially just capturing the same thing. So Korotkov and I are very good friends because we talk the same language, but we understand the same thing. One, from the traditional system, you call it as Nadis, and the bioweather system calls it as whatever internal communications of different organ systems. They're all one and the same. And so yoga is essentially about activating or optimizing the communication within the biomeridians, which are called nadis in yoga. And when they're optimized, you experience better health because the inner communications of the body are optimized. And of course, we as cosmic beings, we optimize the communication not only within the body, but also with the cosmic communication. When that happens, you're able to go beyond the body. And from a yoga perspective, we say we are born to do our cosmic purpose through this body. And in deep sleep, we actually communicate with the cosmos. And from a biological perspective, it is known that when you have good deep sleep, your immune system gets restored. And the immune system is the representation of our cosmic connection in our physiological being. And so when you have good deep sleep, when you can sleep well, or you can get the same effect of that communication when you're able to go into the higher meditation. And in that higher meditation, you are able to, without falling asleep, communion with the cosmos. And when you're able to do that, you develop what you might call as psychic abilities. You can tune into people. You can know various things that go beyond the body. So that is essentially the nadis, both working within the body and outside the body.
Okay. In various older books that I've read on the nadis, there are different numbers, different amounts of nadis, 72,000, 72 million. What is your perspective on this? What is relevant? What's important?
The traditional books, actually, if you go into, there are 2 numbers that are given, 72,000 and 300,000. And these traditional books are really the Shiva Samhita is one of them. And then Vasishta Samhita is another one. And then there are the Tantra texts that go into them. But these are the 2 numbers. If people start adding more numbers to it, these things tend to happen. And but from our perspective, we don't pay attention to the numbers over there, because we come from an orientation of scientifically trying to understand them. And that is why the Korotkov equipment, what it allows us to, read the communication, that is what is of interest to us. So the numbers don't matter to us. But we do say that there are 5 levels of nadis. 5 levels of nadis is different from the count of number of nadis. The first 2 levels are the level that is related to the musculo-skeletal system and the biochemical system of the body. And these 2 levels are essentially the physiology of the body. And this is what most of people who work with Chinese meridian healing work with. But the higher Chinese people understand that the lower levels of meridians are not the only ones. There are higher levels. And the 3 higher levels are the levels that relate to the gene expression, the vitality control, and the immune system or the adaptive system of the body. So those are the 5 levels of nadis. And when we work with them, we work with all of them. And of course, the biomeridian readings of Korotko, it is not 100%. It does not give us everything. But nevertheless, it gives us enough to be able to map many of these things.
These 5 levels of the nadis, is this synonymous with what we know as the koshas?
Well, you can think of them that way, yes. But the thing is basically, again, once you get into the Nadi terminology, the mapping is approximate, not exact into the koshas.
Circling back to your introductory video, which was a great succinct presentation of your whole system, you term the Nadi network or the biomeridians primovascular system. Can you explain that term? It's new to me.
Yes, the primovascular system is you can call it as a recent discovery. The scientifically published papers go back to the year 2004. Now, in 1960s, there was a North Korean who published a document which is now available. However, at that point in time, nobody believed him, so it was not considered scientific enough to be absorbed. But the PubMed papers are available from 2004. And here they talk about a system or a communication channels that are there in the myelination of the nerves. Now, when I say the myelination of the nerves, people from anatomy know that if you go inside the body and if you look at the major nerves look like our coax cables, okay, or our electrical cables, where we have that plastic or rubbery kind of thing on the outside, and inside you have the copper wires. The nerves are inside like the copper wires, whereas the outside, that whatever that rubber or plastic thing you feel, that is the myelination of the nerves. So within the myelination, there is a separate channel running, and that separate channel is the nadis that are, or the primovascular system that are going along in the myelination of the nerves. It is also there within the blood vessels. It is there in the covering tissues, the fascia of every organ. And it is there in every part of the physical system you can think in terms of. It is running over there. So it is there all over the body. And that is the primovascular system. And the primovascular system is not fully mapped out at this time. But to the degree that it has been mapped out, it could be the 72,000 nadis or the 300,000 nadis, because they are there all over the body.
Is there a good resource for viewing that map?
Actually, at this point in time, the PubMed publications, which are close to about 200 published articles since 2004, and in fact, I will refer you to 2 papers which actually give you the full review of the entire research done. And these are from 2015, 2016. One of them is by an osteopath, and the name of the osteopath is Let me look it up. 1 second. And that's a very good paper to read. I'll give you the reference right now. I'm pulling up my reference over here. But the other one, which is a very good reference also, is by an author called Kang, K-A-N-G. And the name of the osteopath is Chikly, C-H-I-K-L-Y. So the whole paper is called, there are multiple authors over there, 3 of them, Chikly, Roberts, and Quagbear. And they call it Primovascular System, a unique biological system shifting a medical paradigm. This is published in the Journal of American Osteopath Association, January 2016. And the PMID, by which people can get through PubMed, is 267-45560. And in the case of Kang, he is the individual author on that. He calls it as Chronological Review on Scientific Findings of Bonghan System and Primovascular System. This is published in Advanced Exposition of Medical Biology, 2016. And the PMID is 275-26157. So those are the precise references. Okay.
Fantastic.
So
regarding, so getting to the, as you're talking about this, it makes me think that the acupuncture meridian system fits underneath this umbrella of the primovascular system, as it being a component of it, as is something like the perineural nervous system, which was identified by Dr. Robert O. Becker, plus everywhere that the fascia exists.
That is correct. And you see, what happens is, the reason why acupuncture got adopted as part of mainstream medicine, and as such it is accepted for health insurance reimbursement, is largely because the research that was done using fMRI, the functional MRI, where they could actually see when expert acupuncturists poked the needle and they said they were picking they were impacting the lung meridian, or they said they would do this meridian or that meridian. It is, the brain has already been mapped out, where modern medicine knows this part of the brain corresponds to the lung control, this part of the brain corresponds to the stomach control. So each time the acupuncturist said, I'm impacting this meridian, they could immediately see in the fMRI studies the part of the brain relating to that organ system working. So they found that it is the brain's areas, according to the stimulating the organ system, is working, and so they accepted it. However, the traditional acupuncturists never believed that the modern people said it is because the brain is being lit, it is working through the nervous system, whereas the acupuncturists never believed that the nervous system was the root channel through which it was working. So it is really working, they believed, through the what they called as they called it as the Mai. Actually, in Chinese, they call the meridians as Mai. And so in anglicized way, we call it as meridians, biomeridians. So they believed it is through that, through which it was working. And that is why they went into the research to go and understand, that's how they found the primovascular system.
Amazing. Okay. So, and then in regards to electrophotonic imaging and the BioWell that you're using, we're looking specifically at the 12 major meridians of TCM.
Yes, but essentially, what happens is the electrophotonic imaging is not 100%. it does not capture 100% of the information of all the meridians. It only captures the information of the meridians on which you can get information from the 10 fingers. And so it is not 100%. So, for instance, in the Chinese system, there is something called the Du Mai and the Ren Mai. And the Du Mai and the Ren Mai are called the governing vessels. Okay? So those are not represented in the 10 fingers. And those are very important vessels, because from a yoga perspective, actually, even within the world of yoga, there is a lot of mix-up. For instance, you would have come across the term Sushumna Nadi, right? Or the central Nadi, as they would call it. And people will tell you, in many systems, they will tell you it runs along the spine. And that is not correct. It actually runs in front of the spine in the middle of the body. Whereas in the subtler yoga system, they understand there is a different nadi that runs along the spine, and that they refer to as the Mukhya Prana Nadi. So both of them are connected. The Mukhya Prana Nadi and the Sushumna Nadi are connected through the chakra system. The chakras are sitting on the Sushumna Nadi, but they extend all the way into the spine also. And so from the Chinese system recognizes these two nadis as Du Mai and Ren Mai, and the governing vessels. So the electrophotonic imaging does not cover all of them, but it only covers the meridians that are represented in the 10 fingers at this time. And of course, Korotko's groups are looking to expand the understanding. And then too, they will not have Du Mai and Ren Mai. They're looking at reading the 10 toes as well. Because, for instance, if you look at the Korotkov system, they have the GI tract mapped, but only from the spine and down. The stomach is not there. Okay? A stomach and above of the GI tract is not there. And that is available from the toes. But that will still not go into the higher, the Du Mai and Ren Mai of the Chinese system. However, they have been able to work enough through these systems where there is enough information to give a fairly reasonable, good representation of the body system, at least for medical application.
Wow, this is exciting. I think it's a good point right now to discuss what is actually, because what you're describing here is the primovascular system is a network of, it's a communication network. It's not the substance that is, it's not the energy that's running through this network, which is what you're measuring. Can you talk about that and some terminology that people may be familiar with around it?
Yes. So you're exactly correct. It is the energy within that we are measuring in the channels. And so what happens is, in different systems, they measure it differently. Now, the electrophotonic imaging is they measure the aura at the tip of the fingers, and knowing where the energy, which part of the aura corresponds to the channel, which channel of the organ system, looking at the aura and the intensity of the light, they can tell how much communication is going on. Now, there are many other systems that are created. There are some where you place your hand on a galvanic sensor that senses the level of heat, sweat, and various other elements in there, and they try to give the same kind of thing. Now, the ancient systems that go from the Chinese and the Ayurvedic system of the Indian system, they go by measurement of 3 fingers of the, they try to measure the pulse with 3 fingers. And now the Chinese will, after reading it, they will come and say they are measuring the yin-yang of different organs in there. Whereas the Ayurvedic person will tell you they're measuring the Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. And each finger of the 3 fingers are the Vata, Pitta, and Kapha respectively. But by measuring with light pulse reading or tight pulse reading, or measuring to see which part of the finger you're sensing, they are going to divide it into 5 types of Vatas, 5 types of Pittas, and 5 types of Kaphas. And by knowing which one it is, they can relate to which organ system they are looking at. So those are all the intuitive, or what you can say, the subjective way of measuring them. Whereas when you have something like Korotkov system, it is giving you objective numbers of the measurement. Chi is the Chinese word for it, and prana is the yogic word for it. And the part is, we have to be careful in use of the word prana. The prana corresponds to I'm going to say something that will confuse everyone, but nevertheless, that is the traditional terminology used, is when they talk about the Ayurvedic system, they will say the vata is the one that is the communicator of the body, within the body. And the vata communicates to the 5 types of pranas. The prana, apana, vyana, udana, and samana. So the prana there refers to the vitality. When we say vitality, the prana is only the communication that regulates the vitality within the system. If you think in terms of how, modern systems will not understand this accurately unless they begin to understand that modern system looks at a person in terms of calories. Whereas we are not looking at calories when we are talking of prana or the vitality of the system. What we are talking of is the ability to manifest energy. You see, if you look in terms of calories, we have enough calories within our body that a person who could manifest all the calories at one time can produce enough energy to lift up a truck and throw it up 30 feet up into the air. But nobody can do that because they don't have the ability to manifest all of that calories in one shot. So prana and calories is not the same thing. It is actually the communication that releases vitality in different parts of the body. Okay? So the prana is the communication that controls the vitality in the body. Apana is the communication that relates to the muscle system. And the vyana, prana, apana, and then vyana is the communication that controls you can think of it as the biochemical circulation in the body. Okay, and then the samana is the control of the gene expression, and udana is the control of the immune and adaptive system of the body. So those are the 5 pranas in there. So they are all communications, whereas communications that stimulate a certain kind of activity within the body.
And in scientific terms, how would you name that?
That's the name I gave you. The control of the musculo-skeletal system, the control of the vitality, which is the prana, control of the biochemical system, or the control of the gene expression, and control of the immune and adaptive system of the body.
I guess where I was going with that was, can you call this the electromagnetic photonic field of the body, or energy?
Exactly. The thing is, you see, any communication, it is important to realize that the communications through the primovascular system or Nadis is in the form of electromagnetic waves. Anytime there is an electromagnetic wave flow, it will give rise to an electromagnetic field, which is the aura. Now, the field is difficult to measure, and the field doesn't give all the information. So that is why we are looking, what happens is, if you can get a person into an electromagnetic field, and if you are able to say which kind of communication is happening, you would get the same information. But on the other hand, in the Korotkov instrument, they have taken the aura of the tip of the fingers, and knowing where the biomeridians lie, they have been able to parse out, how much communication is happening based upon the intensity of the aura for each segment.
Got it. And not to belabor the point, just for slightly more clarity, can you say that flowing through this primovascular system are both electrons and photons?
Yes, that's what we think it is. Now, it has not yet been fully proven that the primovascular system is the Nadis, whereas that was what motivated the Korean system, because they believed that the chi that is flowing through the body is flowing through an entirely different channel other than the nervous system. And so that's what motivated the research. But at this point in time, modern physiological perspective, the research is not complete.
Okay. Let's move now into your system of yoga therapy. Walk us through step by step as an overview of how that works.
From our yoga therapy perspective, it is really going back to the ancient roots of therapy in India. The original Ayurvedic system in India was based upon 95% of it was based upon lifestyle management, and 5% was based upon herbal treatment. I'm giving approximate numbers, it's not exact numbers, but essentially I'm conveying the point. Herbal treatment was a very small proportion of Ayurvedic treatment. Now the bulk of it was when we call lifestyle management, and I used as a to make the point that it was the bulk of it. I used the number 95%. Half of that was related to how you regulated your life, when you woke up, when you went to sleep, what kind of diet you had, and what kind of activities you participated in, and all of that. And the other half of that lifestyle element was the asana techniques of yoga, the breathing elements of yoga, the sound vibrations of yoga, chantings, the power of affirmation, where you took your mind to, what kind of thoughts you had, and all the meditative things you did, where you blanked out the mind and you sought to connect with the cosmos. So these are the different elements which are all part of the Ayurvedic system. So what has happened is the old Ayurveda was forgotten for various reasons. And I believe the reasons why it was forgotten was that in the ancient Indian system, all the Ayurvedic physicians their salary came from the kingdom. So they were really funded. And so what these people did was they never took any fees for whoever went to them for any consulting. In most cases, they would just give them advice what to do and what yoga exercises to do, or what dietary habits, or when to sleep, when to wake up, what kind of activities they should engage, how they should control their mind, and that was it. And so there was no fee for their consulting. In the small percentage of time where they told them to take a herbal supplement, they would give them the herbal supplement and only take fees for the herbal supplements, whatever they dished out. Now, at a later point in time in India, when the support of the kingdom for these Ayurvedic physicians got taken away, then at that time, because for centuries they had only taken money when they would dish out herbal things, slowly it went in that direction. And eventually, pretty much all of the Ayurvedic people in India would dispense out herbs, and anybody who went to them because they needed to make a living and they needed to charge some money, they would dish out herbs, and herbal treatment became part of the common Ayurvedic treatment. And so I think that's how what we call yoga therapy today, which we believe was integral to Ayurveda, got lost. We are reviving that same type of yoga therapy. And that same type of yoga therapy, actually, from a historical perspective, it was probably revived by the Krishnamacharya yoga tradition. And in the Krishnamacharya yoga tradition, you will never find a yoga class. Everything is individual-based yoga therapy. And how they will do is they will measure the Ayurvedic way with the 3 fingers. And then they will have the person do whatever practice they recommend. And then they will go and measure with the 3 fingers immediately after to see whether there are any changes happening. And that is how they will be able to measure whether the yoga therapy is working. We do it the same way, and we do with the help of Korotkov's instrument also. So we essentially have 4 points of assessment in our yoga therapy. One is we have the conventional diagnosis of what the problem is. Second is we take an entire lifestyle analysis of them, how they sleep, what time they go to sleep, how they wake up, how are the bowel movements, what kind of work they do, what kind of activities they participate in, what kind of meals they have. So all of these we assess. Then the third assessment is the Korotkov's reading, which we take. And the fourth one is we also measure with the 3 fingers. And so with these 4 measurements, we do a pre and post analysis to see what changes have happened. That is how we do our yoga therapy.
That's really fascinating. So let's say you get this assessment completed, then the next step is this protocol that you...
we recommend for them, you do this or do that. And anytime they do this, immediately after they do it, we can measure with the Korotkov instrument and with the 3 fingers, and we look to see whether any change happened. And if the change did happen, then we know it is, and the change is happening in the positive direction. Now, what is the meaning of positive direction? In the conventional Ayurvedic system, you've probably heard the term that your true nature is your Prakriti, and how you have changed is your Vikriti. So we always, when we are measuring, we measure the Vikriti and the Prakriti, and then we see whether as a result of the practice you did, the Vikriti is going back towards the Prakriti, in which case we know it is working. And in the Korotkov system, we measure to see whether the excessive communication or the low communication in the organ system goes back towards normal communication. So that's how we measure it.
That's excellent. Well, give us a case study, if you can, or two, of a protocol that you've delivered and what that would look like. Because some people are probably trying to imagine, okay, well, if I was to go to your clinic, what would happen for me, right? So, give us an example or two.
Okay, I will give you the examples of the most egregious cases we have dealt with. When I say egregious cases, these are the cases of people who are in conditions for which normal conventional medicine has no answers. And these people have gone to all the different yoga therapists of the world who could not give them any answers, all the Ayurvedic physicians of the world who could not give answers. But what gave answers was our system. So this is a case of a person who was 71 years old. And this person was suffering from chronic fatigue syndrome for 35 years. You've heard of chronic fatigue syndrome, right?
Yes.
And for which there is no known cure. And so this person had progressively come where over the last few years, out of 30 days in a month, 20 days the person would never get out of bed. Okay, it was so severe. And so when he came to us and we took the measurement, the Korotkov instrument showed us that the afferent nerves, you know what are the afferent nerves? The peripheral nervous system. The afferent nerves are the nerves which communicate to the brain, whereas efferent nerves are the ones which send the communication back from the brain to the rest of the body. So the afferent nerves were weak. So when we found the afferent nerves were not communicating well enough, we have one yoga exercise that specifically stimulates afferent nerves. And so once it stimulated the afferent nerves, after 15 minutes of doing this practice, his chronic fatigue immediately went away. And so that's how we knew it was working.
And this exercise that you're referring to, is this an asana, pranayama, or a meditation, or a chant, or?
It's a pranayama. And the thing is, you see, what people don't realize is that each pranayama technique is really a neurological. It has really neurological impact. People often think of it as breathing exercise, but it is not really a breathing exercise. All pranayama exercise have a neurological impact. Okay. And so each one, now it is very, very unfortunate in the world of yoga, people who teach pranayama exercise and give particular names for those exercise, idea about the neurological impact, and they don't know how to do it right either. 90% of them. So when you do it in a wrong way, it does not have a desired impact.
Well, it's an
Okay.
interesting point that you're bringing up, because I remember reading in, I think it was a Light on Yoga, Iyengar's book, where he's basically says, essentially says, don't do pranayama unless you know what you're doing, or unless under good supervision.
Actually, I have to qualify a little bit over there. Actually, that statement comes from the Hatha Yogic tradition. Okay, within the, Hatha Yoga and yoga are not one and the same. You see, the system of yoga came traditionally from 33 religious traditions in India. And those 33 religious traditions can be bundled into 3 systems of yoga. The 3 systems of yoga are Hatha Yoga, Tantra Yoga, and Bhakti Yoga. Now, each of those 3 systems have problems of their own. And the person who basically clarified all of them is that sage called Patanjali, who wrote the root document of yoga, the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. And the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali removes the problem of the Hatha Yoga tradition. It removes the problem of the Tantra Yoga tradition. It removes the problem of the Bhakti Yoga tradition. And it gives the correct way to practice yoga. Now, the Hatha Yoga tradition, the basic mistake they make is, Hatha Yoga tradition does not have the idea that any practice that you do has to be done in such a way where there is no strain in the body. Strain is equal to stress. Anytime there is strain or stress in any practice you do, there can be no beneficial results from yoga. So the key part is, from the Hatha Yoga tradition, they will tell you the pranayama techniques are so strong that unless you have the alignment of the physical nadis, if you do the pranayama traditions that are supposed to evoke the neurological power within, it will create damage if you don't do it right. And I agree with them. But the thing is, you see, what happens is, if you know how to use pranayama techniques in the correct way, the Hatha Yoga, the asana is not really needed at all. Okay? The first thing to understand is, in the Hatha Yoga tradition, particularly from the Iyengar tradition, they pay so much attention to the alignment of the body, right from the tip of the toes to the top of the head. They fail to understand, while all of them are important, and I agree with the Iyengar tradition that all of the alignment is important, but in order to do pranayama, the most important alignment is the spine. So if you can keep the spine straight, you can pretty much do the pranayama, many of the pranayama elements. And the pranayama elements can be done at low level and at high level. The low level elements of pranayama you can do safely with a straight spine, and you don't necessarily need to have the degree of the spinal alignment that the Iyengar yoga would prescribe. Okay, so the Hatha Yoga element, because they pay a lot of attention on the physical cleansing. You see, Hatha Yoga's focus is on physical cleansing. So they give a lot of importance to the physical cleansing, and therefore they push the body a lot. And that is not really needed. And this is what Patanjali pointed out, that what is asana? Sthiram sukham asana. In other words, when you're able to be seated in an aligned posture where you feel yourself completely in a completely relaxed state. And of course, if the spine is straight, that is good enough for asana. And he's also telling you further that when you're in that state of asana, the positives and negatives, heat and cold, none of them should really affect you. Your mind should be able to be calm. And if you can attain that, then that is good enough. Whereas from a Hatha Yoga tradition, that is not good enough. Okay? So this is where Patanjali clarifies that. And in the Tantra Yoga tradition, the concept of moving energy communication within and beyond the body is very, very important. And so what happens is, in the Tantra Yoga tradition, the power of intent, the Ajna center, becomes very, very important. And the spine becomes very, very important. And as a result of this, since one can move many things, the sense of doership, the sense of me as the controller, is the basic pitfall of the Tantra tradition. And Patanjali takes great pains to say that if you get into that trap, you will never be able to reach the highest level of yoga. And people who come from Tantra Yoga tradition in the Puranas, there are stories about them. A person called Durvasa Muni who got, who learned a lesson because the person did not, the sense of me as the controller did not go away. And the real sense of it is the surrender to the higher, to God. And so this is where the Bhakti Yoga tradition comes in. But the Bhakti Yoga tradition, because again, they have their own problem, where their God becomes superior to other people's gods. Okay, so the thing is, you see, all three of the systems have problem. And this is where the Yoga Sutra gives you the clarity that the concept of surrender to God is the concept of that which is beyond everything. By whatever name you call it, it is all the same thing. It is the highest. So that is where the clarity comes in. And yes, so when we do all of these practices, it has to be done consistent with the Yoga Sutras. Then in which case there are no do's and don'ts. And you can understand from the perspective of the Maharishi Mahesh Yogi's transcendental meditation system. If you follow the Hatha Yoga system, that kind of going into the higher level of meditation without doing the asanas would be completely forbidden. So when we understand the yoga system, we have to understand it with the complete understanding of the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. This is where he brings the whole system together. So Hatha Yoga is not yoga.
Okay.
The yoga system is coming from the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali.
Okay, getting to your various building blocks, you mentioned them before, the extracellular matrix.
Yes. The extracellular matrix is all the communications that are happening within our cellular space within the body. The body is about, actually, one physician gave me a number of 70 trillion cells in the body, but I think it is trillions of cells, whatever trillion it may be. And we have to understand each cell in its innate nature is of the same nature. You see, whereas on the other hand, each cell talking to each other has decided, some set of cells decided to become your ears, some set of cells your nose, some set of cells, the hair that is growing on you, some cells your feet, some your stomach, some your liver. Each is doing a different function, even though at a cellular level, every cell is really the same, right? And so there is a communication going on right from the time when the zygote is formed, where the life begins, that there is as the cells multiply, they're talking to each other and each is becoming a different organ of the body. So this cellular communication, all the communications that is happening in between the cellular spaces, you can think of it as some kind of communication that is happening within the cellular space. But this again is not the Nadis, okay? Actually, the real communication that is regulating the system is going into the Nadis. But from the Nadis, when they are coming into the physical space, that is where the extracellular matrix comes in. Extracellular matrix is within the physical space. all in between the cells that is going on. So from a biological perspective, all the if you take any food that is if you consume some food, it stimulates all the digestive organs and all of that, right? So here it is all in the form of vibrations that's happening. That is what is considered the extracellular matrix. Okay, so the extracellular matrix is the communication from the body into the nadis, and the nadis also communicate back into the body through the extracellular matrix. Now, of course, wireless communication, you can understand, is the power of intent and all of that, the immune system, our cosmic communication in deep sleep. Direct communication, you can understand when you poke with the acupuncture needle, or there is a concept of marma points, there is a concept of acupressure, the reflexology. So all of those are the direct communication. And so when we work with all of these are communicating within. Now, the extracellular matrix is impacted by any medication you take. There are people who take for hypertension, they take medication. For diabetes, they take medication. Then the food that you eat, all of them are part of the extracellular matrix. Now, what happens is, from a therapy perspective, we can tell you that anything that works through the extracellular matrix alone will have limited impact in healing a person. Why? Because the extracellular matrix is communicating into the nadis, and the nadi sees the extracellular matrix is in order, so it says keep doing whatever you're doing. So keep popping the medication that you're taking, it is keeping you in balance. So when will the nadis try to correct the system? When your medications are not fully taking care of you, then it will look to see how it can change the system to correct you. Right? So the thing is, this is the reason from modern medicine perspective, people get into a chronic stage where they are in the system, they're popping the pills and they're not improving at all. They're just having to keep on going into it. And this is why, whether it is anything that comes from the outside the extracellular matrix, is what is going to begin to make this system change. The power of your intention is a very important thing. And in yoga, the mind is a very important thing, because in yoga, the mind, body, and the spirit integration that's where you go outside the extracellular matrix. That's how you begin to change the process.
Yeah, I'm sure we have some listeners that are going, okay, all right, doctor. So can you give us without running us through all the assessments, can you give us practical activities or things that we can do to take care of ourselves?
The first thing I would recommend is any kind of practice that would lead to spinal alignment. How you choose to do it is your preference. Many people like to do the sun salutation and the conventional asanas, the sideward and the backward twists and all of those. You can do all those asanas if you feel like. The other way in which you can do is you can find any type of exercise that would stimulate the spine, and you do it with mindful awareness as you're doing it. That will take care of it. What will that do? The spinal alignment will give you the basic element of the basic thing that asanas focus on to give you that alignment. Second thing I will suggest is that good deep breathing, slow deep breathing. And slow deep breathing should never be done more than 20 breaths at a time. Because slow deep breathing will create something called, if you do it long enough, it will create something called respiratory alkalosis, whereby people can pass out. That is why it should only be done 20 breaths at a time. And after 20 breaths, you check to see whether you have any sensation in the head. And if you don't have any sensation in the head, then in which case you go on and you continue with another 20 breaths like this. You can do like 3 to 5 rounds of 20 breaths. And what this will do is, it will along with the alignment of the spine, it will generate the communications along the central nervous system of the body that will essentially revitalize the whole system. And the third practice that I will recommend for everyone is some kind of practice, at least once or twice a day preferably, when they make the mind come to a stop. And the mind can come to a stop in various different ways. For people who have very active minds and they cannot stop the mind from thinking, what they should do is what I call mindfulness meditative walking. So they can walk 4 steps, they inhale and they watch the breath, and another 4 steps or 5 steps or 6 steps, they exhale, and usually exhalation little longer than inhalation is always useful. But what happens is they keep the regular 4 steps inhale, 5 steps exhale, or whatever, and they keep on doing this as they are walking. So by keeping the physical coordination with the breath, the mind has to be focused on that. So there is no more, but there is no more time available for the mind to wander. So this becomes a nice mindfulness meditative exercise. And for people for whom the mind is less prone to wandering, they can sit and do the same breathing awareness. And so this is a mindfulness-based exercise that anybody can do. And these are 3 exercises I will recommend for anyone who wants to practice.
Talk briefly, if you can, about the importance of sound and how that impacts the whole system.
Okay. Sound goes into a different area altogether. You see, this is an area that cannot be verified from the Karatko machine, and it is not something that can be understood from a physiological setup. You see, but from a yoga perspective, you know the concept of a causal body, the subtle body, and the physical body, right? Now, all of these vibrations are going on in the subtle body, and the subtle body's entry into the physical body is what you're feeling with the 3 fingers when an Ayurvedic physician or a Chinese physician are looking at. And this is the same vibration that the Karatko machine captures. However, when you work with sound vibration, so most of all of these practices are working between the subtle body and the physical body. However, when people have deep issues, and the deep issues will come in the form of mental health issues, and it will come in the form of deep set issues that are incurable, like chronic fatigue, or for that matter, cancer, and all of these. For all of these, what you need to do is you need to unlock the communication from the causal body to the subtle body. And the entry point of the causal body to the subtle body are the 7 chakras. And sound vibrations have powerful impact in opening out the communication between the causal body to the subtle body. And so sound vibrations go into that much deeper zone. And working with sound vibration is a much more difficult task. We do that. And when we do that, then in which case it is very, very customized. It is not generic. It is individual to each person. So the sound vibrations are in a much higher zone of yoga.
Explain, if you can, briefly, your courses, your certifications, and where folks can get more information about you.
Okay. Our courses for this dimension, what we really offer in this dimension is really a 1-year training. However, for people like you who understand the dimensions of yoga, you can understand this. But the kind of conversation we had over here, if I speak to a normal physician, they will think we are mad. They won't even understand this. So what we do is, we do CME courses, that's continuing medical education courses for doctors, because our goal is to change the medical system. But then we have to work with small doses in which they can understand. So there we go with verified, scientific studies of what is understood, because CME courses are based on evidence-based medicine. So we don't get into the kind of depth that we are talking about over here. But what we do is, there are some of the physicians from these courses who are enlightened enough, who are ready to come for the 1 year training course. And in this 1 year training course, this is for anyone. So it is not just restricted to physicians. People like you, anybody who's in yoga would come. And in fact, the ideal what we have is what we have happening in Houston right now. In Houston, we have a doctor and a therapist who is also very spiritually a psychic and all of that. So these two people together are our medical team in Houston. And we have clinics running in Houston dealing with patients on a regular basis. But it is the doctor and this therapist together, both of whom who are trained in yoga, who are doing this. And we have trained them. We began their training in January, and they're pretty much trained. But what happens is, every time they have a question, they are working with patient, I'm on the phone with them over here, and they're taking the assessment, they're relaying online what the assessments they take and all of that. So I give phone consulting, but only when they need it. 90% of the time, they're already trained to a degree where they know what to do. And so we began the training from last year and formally from January, and we are not fully completed yet. But next January, we'll begin a new set of people. But when we begin the training, this kind of training is not possible for a large number of people. Okay? So when we begin the training, we begin with 4 to 6 people at a time. That's a very small number. Because you see, otherwise you cannot really teach people how to go into the subtle dimensions of this. So in the month of September, we'll be announcing the full detailed course curriculum for what we'll begin in January. And we'll be very selective in terms of only working with 4 to 6 people. And at this time, our plan is to do it in Houston, because how we do it is, actually, we do every week, 1 weekend a month, we meet where we do the academic training part. But then every weekend, when we are not doing the face-to-face training, people are asked to do a case study. So they will do case studies, and then after that, they will get to working with patients. And so, since the first time we did the training was in Houston, we also have a bunch of patients and regular clinics in Houston, and so that's why Houston is a good place. But then if there is anybody else where we have a group of people who are in other location and they have access to patients, and there is a physician who is working with them, then we could probably do it in other places also. But in September, we will announce our plans for January next year.
Fantastic. Please give us your websites before we sign off.
It is lifeinyoga.org, lifeinyoga.org. And we will keep updating that place over there. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Doctor, for coming on.
Thank you, Jonathan. Nice talking to you. And hopefully people will benefit from this.